Cork from Texarkana, Texas, Sacred Heart Catholic Church. Husband, father of 4, lifelong Catholic, and president of the Texarkana Chamber of Commerce. My job is to promote a world-class business climate for the business community here in Texarkana, USA. We're a 2-state, 2-city region here in Northeast Texas and Southwest Arkansas. And my job is basically to showcase how great our business community is and our quality of life is here in the area. It's extremely challenging. Most Chamber of Commerce presidents have one city to worry about and maybe one state. Here we have 2 of everything, and with all the things you might think are challenging about that. But it's a very relationship-driven business, and I think that's where my faith helps me out in bridging those challenging situations. I was raised Catholic by great Catholic parents, went to CCD class, married a Catholic schoolgirl, and then went off to the military and off to college. And those 2 experiences really shaped the way I thought about the world, particularly since I read philosophy when I was in college. And I fell away from the church. And after about 10 or 15 years, through the intercession of the Blessed Mother, and although I continued to pray the rosary, even though I wasn't a very practical Catholic, she brought me back to the church about 15 years ago. And ever since that time, I've just really become more and more deeply in love with my faith, and really through more of a real and authentic practice of fully involving myself in the liturgical life of the church and the sacramental life of the church. My involvement in the liturgical life of the church really started off with almost a sudden shock. I moved to Texarkana 8 years ago to take a job here, and within the first few months was trying to find a church home. I actually wound up in the chapel of St. Michael's Hospital, sitting next to Sister Damien Murphy one morning at 7:15 in the morning, and she grabbed me by the arm and she sat me down next to her, handed me the Liturgy of the Hours, and had me sing the Liturgy of the Hours with her. And it really showed me how wonderfully beautiful our religious life is, and what a great gift that we have in the sisters that we have in the church. And really from there, she taught me to fall in love again with the liturgy, just through her own witness and example. And it was just a touching moment and a period of years where every day I went back and prayed with her in the morning. And from there, I just had to be more and more involved in understanding, praying, and actively involving myself in prayer and the liturgy. And it was just what God led me to do. Today, as an instituted acolyte for the Diocese of Tyler, I'm very intimately involved now in the liturgy, but that didn't happen all at once. From my love of praying the Liturgy of the Hours and attending daily Mass, really became more of an exploration for the history of the liturgy. As a person who read philosophy and history, I always found it fascinating. How did we come to do the things that we did? And so I started reading the Church Fathers and the history of the church and the history of the liturgy, the organic development of the liturgy, and really became connected to the church tradition going back 2,000 years and what my place as a lay faithful person in the Mass, what that was and how that came from the time of Christ. And that connection to 2,000 years of history and prayer and belief, and how we are so involved spiritually and physically in the Mass, just really compelled me to learn more and more. And from that, I started to serve in the Mass about 6 years ago. And after that first time, it really just didn't stop from there. I was an altar server when I was a boy, and used to serve daily Mass every summer during my junior high years at 7:30 in the morning, and dreaded it. It was sort of like a chore you had to go to. Didn't know what was really happening, didn't know what I was doing or why, but now that I know, I realize what a great gift that was at that time, and how that was actually part of my own development. Serving in the Mass it's not difficult and complicated to do if you love doing it, and if you really have a connection to your own personal theology and your own personal spirituality. It becomes an extension of what you are. The practicum is difficult to learn, and you have to learn how to do certain things, but after you internalize those practices, you learn to be able to pray the Mass incredibly deeply and personally. And I often tell people in my own experience that when I'm kneeling at the altar during the consecration, I literally envisioned myself laying on the altar with Jesus, dying to this world, and then resurrecting to new life. And it's something that makes me emotional even when I talk about it now. Reconnecting with that well of spiritual strength and power is something that when you really experience it, you can never give it up. In trying to more fully, actively, and consciously involve yourself in the Mass, it's hard for some lay people to really get their minds around. But what I try to do, especially when I catechize on the Mass for my fellow lay faithful, it's what worked for me was I put myself in the place of Jesus. That's really what we're called to do in this world, is to be Jesus to the world. And in the Mass, it's no different. We need to put ourselves on the altar. We need to put ourselves into the sacrificial offering. We need to offer up ourselves. We need to die to this world, and we need to rise with Christ to new life. And so to put yourself into that spiritual dimension, you have to live as Christ lived through his passion, death, and resurrection. And if on Sunday or whenever we celebrate the Mass, we place ourselves at the foot of the cross, we place ourselves at the tomb when it's open, we think about all of those things that the Blessed Mother experienced during that time, and try to represent in our own heart and our own mind exactly what was going on there, then the well of spiritual grace can be opened for us, and we can truly benefit from the font of our faith. I think people can come who've never been in a Catholic church before and enter into that mystery if they open their heart and mind to it. Although I do think that catechesis, formation, and a continuous participation in the spiritual and sacramental life of the Church is essential to fully draw all the benefits that Christ offers in this wellspring of grace, we can benefit with those divine brushes with grace no matter how we come to it, as long as we come with faith and a belief and a willingness to open ourselves to the mystery. And I think that's exactly what this world is missing. The world has so many things that are in your face and so obvious and so direct that what Christ offers us in his Mass is these divine brushes with grace. It's not so obvious. It's something you have to actually participate in order to fully realize. And to me, that is what the great gift of the Mass is. The crucifix is really the icon of the suffering that Christ went through for us to redeem us from our fall from grace. And although the crucifix can be also a sign of torture and almost a morbid reflection of the terrible acts that humanity can provide to people, it also is a way for us to see our way clear to salvation. The crucifix is the nexus between the world and our own redemption. And to meditate on it, to venerate it, to observe it, and to have it so prominently placed in our church as a continuous reminder of that redemption is really what being a Catholic is all about. My own discovery of the Mass and sort of my discernment to the permanent institution of Acolyte really was something that is not something I immediately desired or saw as a goal. And so when people come to me and ask me, well, how do you do that? How do you check that box and become that person and get that title? I try to share with them that it really isn't about a goal. It's really about a continuous process of discernment and formation, and about the willingness to open yourself up to the mystery of the liturgies that the Church provides and to put yourself in them. And at some point, the Holy Spirit will touch you and say, it's now time to make a permanent commitment to a lifetime of service at the altar. And it really sort of smacks you in the, kind of in the head and says, I think I'm already there. And it's at that point then you speak to the bishop and you share this with the bishop, and he will discern with you whether or not you're ready, and then that's what happens. So when people come to me and say, how do you get that job? I say, first of all, it's not a job. It's a lifetime of commitment of lifetime of service. And the best way to determine whether or not you're prepared for that is to live a lifetime of service and to begin that process of doing that. And at the right time, you'll be there.
you.